Welcome to beautiful Cornwall Park here in Bellingham, Washington. We're going to take a peek at Cornwall Park, the Railroad Trail, Whatcom Falls Park, and Blodell Donovan Park on both a weekday and a weekend to see how well we are doing physical distancing. Also, we're going to talk about the relationship between AIDS and COVID-19. As you can see, Cornwall Park is very quiet, both on the weekend and the weekday. At 70 acres, this park makes a very nice, quiet refuge. We are now leaving Cornwall Park, headed towards the Railroad Trail, which was created from an abandoned railroad right-of-way that will lead us to both Whatcom Falls Park and Blodell Donovan Park, which is one of the three busiest parks here in Bellingham, along with Maritime Heritage Park in downtown Bellingham and Boulevard Park, which is on the shores of Bellingham Bay between downtown and Fairhaven. Now let's begin to explore the differences and the similarity between AIDS and COVID-19. We're going to start with a little bit of music, but during the music, I'm going to project some definitions on the screen. I ask you please review them and contemplate them. We will be using these terms throughout this discussion. Okay, let's start with transmission. With COVID-19, the transmission is done through the virus being contained in respiratory droplets produced when an infected person coughs, sneezes, sings, shouts, or breathes hard, and the droplets end up in the mucous areas, mouth and nose, or the eyes of another person and enters the lungs. This is why it's very important for everyone to wear face masks and to maintain a minimum 6-foot distancing between persons. AIDS, or HIV, however, requires body fluids of the infected person to enter the bloodstream of another person. This is facilitated by sexual contact or needle exchanges or transfusion of blood or from the mother to an unborn infant. This is why it's important to wear a condom or totally abstain from sexual contact. However, being in a crowded room or an elevator with people with AIDS will not facilitate transmission. This is a very big difference between AIDS and COVID-19. The period during which a person is contagious is very different between the two epidemics. With COVID-19, the maximum period a person is contagious is about 14 to 21 days, or 3 days at the end of symptoms, whichever is longer. However, with AIDS, it is forever. That is, once you catch AIDS, you are contagious forever, except if you are under a very, very strict regime of drugs. This is very, very important to know. Quarantine, as we all know, for COVID-19 is 14 days from exposure or 3 days after the last symptoms are done, whichever is longer. For AIDS, however, the quarantine period is indefinite. That is, you must not have sex unless you're protected with a condom or you are undergoing a very strict regime of drugs. This is a very, very important and big difference between the two epidemics. Now here's yet another very big difference. Let's talk about incubation. Incubation is the period between the time you are infected and the time you see the first symptoms. For COVID-19 is generally 3 to 14 days. With AIDS, the incubation period can be anywhere from 4 to 5 years all the way up to 10 to 11 years. Now let's think about that. That means for 10 years, you will not know that you've been infected with the HIV virus because there are no symptoms, even though there's apparently nothing being felt or seen. The virus is doing its work in weakening your immune system. Now let's explore the relationship between that very long incubation period for AIDS and the history of the AIDS epidemic. Before we do that, however, let's explore trail etiquette. I am about to gently open the bicycle camera sound so you can hear me give a polite and proper warning. Hello! Hi! Thank you! Hello! Thank you, thank you! I try to sing or shout a warning to people on the trails in front of me, and then as I pass them, I try to give them as much room as possible, both for safety as well as the COVID-19 directed physical distancing. Now let's resume the conversation. The first patients with symptoms became known around the late 1970s and early 1980s in the major cities. However, they were actually infected in the early 1970s. So, over 10 years, they continued to have sex, or continued to exchange needles, or continued to donate blood, or to continue to give birth to babies. No one was wise to the fact that we had a ticking time bomb going on. That also means that the healthcare community was not aware of it, so no research or care or even awareness was happening within the medical community, while the virus was continuing its work in destroying the immune system of the patients. This also means, of course, there were no tests available because the medical establishment did not know that there was anything to be tested for. So we had a complete unawareness among the world community. Now, before I go on, I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to tell a little story from the deck of this beautiful little bridge overlooking the city. Back in 1982, in the major cities, especially San Francisco, Los Angeles, and New York, we of the LGBTQ community had to first of all build ourselves a support system. And with the help of activists such as Larry Kramer, organizations such as ACT UP and Queer Nation, we all got together to first of all provide support for ourselves and to build a bridge between ourselves and the community at large. And we forced the communities and the governments to support us and to engage in research to find out what's going on with AIDS and what can be done. Now, with this bridge that we built, go ahead, I'm just doing a brief Bellingham TV interview. Go ahead. This bridge that we built during the AIDS crisis, I hope, dear gosh, that we are using this same bridge for the COVID-19 crisis. If we end up tearing this bridge down and starting over again, now, I hate to say it, I would have to cry and assume that we as society have achieved nothing. With COVID-19, most of us know the symptoms which are similar to the flu, such as fever and chills, congestion, headache, maybe an upset stomach, shortness of breath, and so forth and so on. Now, please note, with AIDS, it's very different. Remember that AIDS destroys your immune system. Therefore, you are subject to what we call opportunistic infections. A common one is called Pneumocystis Carini pneumonia. Called PCP for short, it is a fungi infection of the lungs. It can cause shortness of breath and fatigue. Often it is called the wasting away disease. About 75% of people with AIDS contract PCP, especially in the days before drugs were available, so it was used as a primitive indication that a person has AIDS. Another symptom, and a visible one by the way, is called Kaposi sarcoma. It is in the form of a very distinctive rash on the skin. You can see a sample on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Photographs of this rash were posted in drugstore windows as seen in the drawing on the upper left-hand corner of your screen. These were important as they alerted gay men that if they have this rash, they must seek immediate medical attention as it's an indication that they may have AIDS. You may wonder why we never were able to come up with a vaccine for AIDS so far. You have to note that with almost every epidemic we've ever received in history ends by the immune system overcoming a weakened microbe, then all of a sudden the critical mass is reduced and the epidemic ends. HIV, however, has the ability to destroy the very immune system that hopefully would have ended up ending this epidemic. COVID-19, however, as far as we know, does not attack the immune system. It is similar to the flu. so it may very well be easier to find a vaccine. Well, now let's migrate from the medical discussion to the societal discussion. Before we do that, my darling, please take my hand, and shall we dance? Will you come and dance with me? It is a fun thing to do. And with the COVID-19 epidemic going on, it is safer than singing. During the AIDS epidemic, it was a happy and healthy and safe thing to do. So give me your hand. Oh, I guess not. We have to stay 6 feet apart. But let's dance the night away, keeping that physical distance here in the park of Bellingham. There are similarities between these two pandemics. Interestingly enough, two key people shared leadership roles in both of them. Tony Fauci, who's the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease Director, and Deborah Birx, who's the Global AIDS Coordinator as well as the Global COVID-19 Coordinator. Of course, there's the fear of the unknown, which leads to finger-pointing and laying of blame. For AIDS, it was mostly gay men. For COVID, it was Asians. We all cower under a virtual panic, whether it is safe sex or being sealed in our homes watching a tiny screen. And don't forget the disparity in medical care. If you are a white, cisgendered male, heterosexual, and wealthy, you will get far better care than if you are just about anyone else that's gay, trans, female, black, Latino, and poor. And don't forget, poor response by our leaders. In the case of AIDS, homophobia led to neglect for years. Reagan never even mentioned the word AIDS except once at the very end of his term. It's sheer incompetence in the case of COVID. Need I say any more? And please don't forget the issue of invincibility, the attitude of, oh no, we're not going to get it, but we are too special. In the case of COVID-19, you need to look no further than the leaders of our country and the Republican Party who are proposing to hold a 10,000-person indoor rally with no physical distancing and no enforcement of wearing masks. And couple that with all the people you see going to stores without wearing masks. In the case of the AIDS crisis, there were many men who just refused to wear condoms. Some for reasons of maybe some discomfort, but most of them, I feel, for the reasons of invincibility. There was also a case where I was a victim of this kind of attitude. However, let's hold off on talking about that story, and let's talk about where we are right now. Welcome to the Old Stone Bridge here in beautiful Whatcom Falls Park. This Work Progress Administration built structure is a beautiful work of art as well as craftsmanship. It is a very, very popular spot here in the park. It's got a wonderful view of the waterfalls and the chutes on the Whatcom Creek. However, this beautiful bridge can be a challenge during today's COVID-19 crisis. Welcome to a private little chat on this wonderful bridge.
Well, hello and welcome to the Old Stone Bridge in Whatcom Falls Park. Right now it's a Tuesday morning in early June, so it's not so crowded right now and it's fairly cool out. But I will tell you this, on a July weekend, we might as well call this the troubled bridge over soothing waters, opposite of what people know as the bridge over troubled waters. Well, this is the waters under the troubled bridge, because this is the most constrained facility. I can almost touch the two sides of the bridge with my outstretched arms. So the distance across this bridge is probably less than 6 feet, which means it's going to be extremely difficult to maintain safe distancing. So may I suggest, on a busy weekend, when you come down this ramp from the parking lot, if this looks crowded, please consider going back and then coming back here on a quiet weekday morning when there is fewer people like right now. So once again, welcome to the waters under the troubling bridge. Unfortunately, not the bridge over troubling waters.
Well, let's get on with the story. I was in a gay bathhouse in San Francisco, and I put my transparent plastic raincoat on over my beautiful body to let my body's beauty shine through, yet protect me from the virus. For this effort in protecting both myself as well as the gay community against the HIV virus, the staff rewarded me by throwing me out of the bathhouse. Whether that was due to invincibility or they just don't like the way I dressed, we don't know. Let's digress from that and take a little side trip to a nice darkened forest.
Here I stand in a darkened forest to emphasize the differences between AIDS and COVID-19. Let's go back to 1982 in a place like New York or San Francisco. And suddenly you're surprised with very, very strange symptoms such as PCP, the pneumonia, or Kaposi, the rash. So you run to the doctor. They don't know what it is, so you end up at a place like San Francisco General Hospital. And they realize that you have a very strange disease that's rare. And nobody knows what's going on because it's been a silent incubation. Now, once you reach that stage of infection, at that time, because of no drugs, it was a 100% fatality rate. So in other words, that's a death sentence. But not only was it a death sentence, it was a very painful, long, excruciating, and gruesome death. You are tortured with headaches, nausea, these very painful rashes, and oftentimes difficulty in breathing. Homophobia was rampant at that time. We're not at this point where things are accepted like they are now. So your family probably will find out that you're gay because you have been diagnosed with what was then called GRID, gay-related immunity deficiency. So now they find out that you're gay without your awareness and consent, and they decide not to visit you because it was a stigma with many religions at that time. So you're not getting any support from your family. Now your lover out there who's your boyfriend, he's not going to be able to come into your room to visit you, to provide you with the emotional and compassion and support, because your relationship is not legally recognized, and hospitals will only allow legally recognized either a spouse, a sibling, or a parent, or a child to visit you. So no visitors. And in addition to that, because it was a strange disease and nothing was known, there was a lot of fear. So the healthcare providers in some hospitals, nurses, aides, those people, often will refuse to come into your room even to feed you. There have been cases where meals were stacked in their trays outside of the door of an AIDS patient's room because nobody would go into the room to bring the meal to the patient. Now, let's say you do have a lover and you're getting care from your lover at your home. So he's spending a lot of time and effort providing emotional, physical, and spiritual care for you. That includes shopping for you, helping you out of bed to go to the bathroom, things like that, in your home, in your shared home. Then the patient dies. The lover at this point, who would be the widow in a wedding, is at his most vulnerable state emotionally and physically, having spent all this energy to care for his loved one who passes away. But because, hello, it's just a television interview, don't mind me. Because that relationship is not recognized legally, the ownership of the house, which they've lived in for a long time, and they thought they jointly owned it. Well, they didn't. Now, the family of the person who died of AIDS, who never came to care for them in the first place, now suddenly shows up. They claim the house and the joint possessions, take everything away, and throw the person out of the house. This has happened. And there's nothing we could do about it because we were not recognized. Things are different now, thanks to the changes in the laws and some Supreme Court decisions. But back then, there was nothing to protect us at all. We were thrown away by the government. Our wonderful, illustrious President Reagan, Ronnie Reagan, the failed movie star, he never mentioned AIDS until the very end of his career. Just as darkness can bring light to shine forth, the AIDS crisis has also brought light from many, many people. Let's give an example. As we all know, there has been a lot of homophobia and hatred towards us coming from the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. However, St. Vincent's Catholic Hospital in New York City became the epicenter of very compassionate care for AIDS patients in New York City during the 1980s. Once the AIDS crisis hit, and us gay men did not receive any compassion or care from the traditional sources of such care, such as families, religious institutions, and society. It was the lesbians who took it upon themselves to step up and provide us with love and compassion and care to us gay men suffering from AIDS. So we wish to thank the lesbians for giving us this care and filling this horrible void left by the traditional sources of care. The lesbians were our holy mothers, the mothers of love. Since a lot of us had no compassion or care coming from our traditional families or our traditional communities, it was up to us as a community to step up and provide that care for each other. And we did it. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of overcoming of fear and prejudice. Fear of different races, different classes, and different styles of our sexuality. We had to overcome all that bias to be able to provide each other the companionship and care and love that we so sorely needed. It was also us getting together that enabled us to start the battle. Through organizations such as ACT UP, Queer Nation, Northwest AIDS Foundation, Shanti, and many others, we established our own infrastructure for care and compassion, but we also set up our own infrastructure for advocacy. We did a lot of changes in the world of advocacy. We had nothing to lose. It was us who used these methods to try to force the government and force society to look at us and say, hey, look, we need your help. It took a long time. It took about 8 years to find the first drug, but by gosh, we fought in the courts, on the streets, in the forums of the various government organizations, and in the media. So we became experts in advocacy. Now what's very interesting is that I am not seeing this same kind of innovation during today's COVID-19 crisis. Now here's an interesting irony between AIDS and COVID-19. Because we were such a marginalized part of society, when AIDS hit hard in the early 80s, the economy, the stock market, business, and industry and society continued on as if nothing happened. We went on our merry way without being aware or conscious that a serious cancer of society was developing. It took the COVID-19 crisis, which is a virus that was an equal opportunity, quick and fast infector, to shake our society and say, hey, look, we need to stop what we're doing. We're hurting too many people. We're hurting the earth. We're hurting the environment. We're hurting everything. You need to come to a quick and hard halt. That's what's happening right now with the COVID-19 crisis. The world now is starting to suffer what we as the LGBTQ community suffered during the early 1980s.
Well, enough of AIDS and COVID. Let's talk about spacing here. This is Blodell Donovan's parking lot on a weekday. It looks fairly quiet. And by the way, Cornwall Park and the Railroad Trail, as you saw, are very quiet, both on a weekday and a weekend. Good places for a nice quiet walk. This parking lot, however, is very busy on a Saturday. However, most of the people are in their cars with their boats waiting in line to launch their boats. Unfortunately, I could not go into the boat launch facility since I do not have a boat, so I didn't even bother trying. So I have to assume that the boat launching facility does enforce physical distancing. Here's the park itself on a weekday. Very quiet, very peaceful, and easy to maintain physical distancing. Again, on a weekday. But welcome to the beach on a Saturday. Much more challenging to find physical distancing, and I don't see too many masks being worn here. Now let's talk about the swimming dock.
Well, hello. We are on Blodell Donovan Park here in Bellingham, and behind me is our swimming dock and diving bridge, although it's not official, but lots of people use that as a diving platform. Well, today is June 15th, a partially cloudy, rather cool weekday. So as you can see, there's not many people, either on the swimming dock or the diving bridge. But let's see what happens when we bump the calendar up to July. How you doing on August? I'm just doing a Bellingham television show. When it's going to be nice and hot here, and let's take a Saturday or a Sunday. This swimming dock will probably be very, very crowded, and lots of people diving off that bridge over there. So I would have to call it a Petri dish, unfortunately. If you were to come here and find a lot of people on the dock or the bridge, may I suggest that you look elsewhere in this beautiful park for another place to take a dip to cool off. Because when we get a lot of people over here, I hate to use this term, it's going to become a Petri dish, a vehicle for a super infection. Now let's talk about an interesting but unfortunate footnote to all of this. Let's go back to 1982 in San Francisco at the onset of the AIDS crisis as manifested by its symptoms among gay men. It was recognized almost immediately that with a primary vector of infection being sexual intercourse between gay men, and with the phenomenon of the gay bathhouses, places at which men can go to have anonymous sex, often having sex with as many as 20 partners at once, which is a major, like a super contagion area for HIV, the AIDS virus. Gay bathhouses were known for places where you couldn't even see or know who you're having sex with. Here's a crude drawing right above that bridge of a possible scene in a gay bathhouse. San Francisco's director of public health, a man by the name of Dr. Mervyn Silverman, whom you can see over the dock, a rather crude drawing that I did online, wanted to close the bathhouses because they were a nuisance, a place where the disease can be spread. And he closed them. Now, let's roll the clock back forward to now. Here's a question for you all. Could Bellingham or Whatcom County's equivalent to Dr. Mervyn Silverman order this dock to be removed, which is simple, it's only a floating dock, and order the railing of that bridge to be raised so people could not dive off of that bridge? Contemplate that and think about that.
Well, look at this. This is a Saturday in early May. We don't have to wait until July or August to see crowds here. Well, I think that's it. I want to thank you very much for joining me on this fascinating journey about the two pandemics and how well we are doing. Bye-bye. Let us take care of each other, for we are the jewelry